Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine stepping into a digital world so immersive it feels, well, almost like a parallel reality. A place where you could maybe own land, build businesses, socialize, experience events, just like you might in the physical world, but entirely online. That's the promise, right? Or maybe the complex reality of the metaverse.
It's definitely a concept that's, jumped from sci-fi pages straight into tech company boardrooms, sparking huge investment and, frankly, a lot of speculation, too.
Absolutely. And today we're diving deep into a comprehensive guide that really tries to lay out exactly what this evolving landscape is all about. This is part one of our exploration.
Right.
And our mission is pretty simple. Based only on the source material you've shared with us, we're going to try and cut through the hype, understand the core idea, trace its history, explore the tech, the economy taking shape, jobs, even peek at a real-world strategy.
Yeah, the material makes it really clear this isn't just about, fancy video games. It's presented as a pretty complex digital space, something intended to have, significant impacts on lots of aspects of our lives.
So let's just jump right in then. What is this thing? The source material kicks off with a really fundamental question. Is the metaverse a real world, or is it just another online game?
And the material is quite specific there. It doesn't call it a real world in the traditional sense. It describes it more as a complex virtual space, a place where individuals can interact, socialize, engage in activities, communities. The key thing is it aims to sort of blur the boundaries between our digital lives and physical reality.
Okay, so not the real world, but perhaps a parallel virtual world, one that mixes elements of reality and imagination. A platform for interaction, maybe?
Precisely. The source gives a couple of definitions that I think really capture this. One calls it a collective virtual space created through the convergence of physical and digital reality. And another one highlights the economic side, calling it an independent virtual economy enabled by digital currencies and storage tools.
An independent virtual economy. Wow. Okay, that's a huge concept. We'll definitely need to dig into that one later. The guide also mentions something about rules.
Yeah, it introduces this idea of 7 rules that supposedly govern this space, though it only really elaborates on 2 of them for us.
Okay, what are they?
So the first rule suggests there's conceptually only one metaverse world. It's viewed as sort of an interactive package, or maybe more practically, a huge network of unique virtual worlds and platforms. The idea is that these individual platforms, while they're distinct, they're meant to operate under some kind of common set of virtual conditions or laws.
Okay. So not just completely separate islands, but envisioned as connected spaces eventually.
Exactly. And the second rule kind of builds right on that interconnectedness,
Okay.
the possibility of actually moving between different platforms within this environment.
Right.
The goal really is that you could potentially navigate from one virtual world to another, sort of like clicking between websites or apps today. The material mentions this is enabled by developments in AI and other areas, suggesting seamless transitions are a key aim.
Okay, that gives us a much clearer picture of the core concept, at least as the source describes it. Now, where did this really ambitious idea even come from? The source traces its roots back decades, doesn't it? Deep into science fiction.
That's right. The whole notion of a shared, persistent virtual place has been explored in sci-fi for, over 30 years. Especially in cyberpunk literature that imagine these future online landscapes.
And the material points to a specific moment, a specific book, where the term itself was coined.
It does, yeah. The term metaverse is specifically credited to Neil Stephenson's 1992 novel Snow Crash. He used it to name the virtual world in his book.
Wow, so the name itself is over 3 decades old. But the actual technological groundwork started even earlier than that.
It did. The material points to the 1980s and 90s as the time when the really early foundations were laid. The birth of the internet itself, the rise of online forums, bulletin boards, those early text-based multiplayer games called MUDs, multi-user dungeons.
Right, I remember those.
And we also saw the first, although very, very limited, virtual reality headsets starting to appear way back then, too.
Yeah, you need the network to connect everyone and then some way for them to actually experience it. Makes sense.
Totally. And then from the 2000s onward, the material highlights some really significant advances that truly paved the way for the current vision. Sure. Things like increased cloud computing power, much better graphics, the explosion of smartphones, and crucially dramatically improved VR and AR headsets.
Sure.
These things made creating and experiencing much more complex, visually rich, simulated environments actually possible.
And that technological progress, it certainly didn't go unnoticed by the big tech companies, did it?
Not at all. The source notes a real surge of interest from, well, many technology giants over the last decade or so, leading to pretty significant investments in developing these metaverse-like spaces.
And the big one mentioned is Facebook changing its name.
Exactly. That culminated in a major event highlighted in the source. Facebook's strategic rebranding to Meta in 2021 that signaled its, global ambitions to be a leader in building this future.
Okay, so the idea is old. The foundational tech evolved over decades, and then recent breakthroughs, plus huge investments, have put it right in the spotlight now.
That's a pretty good summary. The material sort of wraps up this historical look by emphasizing that while the concept's been around, it's really the convergence of current capabilities, things like VR, blockchain, AI, modern graphics, that makes a fully realized metaverse vision feel, well, genuinely within reach now, even though development is still very much active.
That leads us right into the next big question, really. Why now? If this idea has been sort of percolating for decades, what are the specific forces driving its, sudden momentum and rise right now?
The material points to several key factors, all kind of converging at the same time. One is just the significant maturation of the underlying systems, the technologies, the tools you need to actually build and run these environments.
What specific tech does the source pinpoint there? What are the key ingredients?
It lists quite a few, actually. The increased computing power just available in consumer devices, phones, laptops, the falling, more affordable prices of VR, AR, mixed reality, MR, and that broader category, extended reality or XR headsets.
Right.
Modern communication networks like 5G, even looking ahead to 6G, are crucial because they can actually handle broadcasting the complex graphics needed.
Okay.
Plus improved graphics engines, 3D simulation systems, and also the increasing integration of blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies. That's a big piece too.
So basically, the necessary digital plumbing and the hardware are finally catching up to the big idea.
That's a huge part of it, yeah. Another major driver mentioned is the expanding innovation economies. The material points to the rise of independent innovators, creators, digital content producers, game makers, influencers. This growing pool of talent is now equipped with more accessible, modern tools that just make world building easier, so they can fill these virtual spaces with engaging content.
More people creating, and the tools are just better now. What else is feeding into this surge?
Well, a really significant factor the material mentions is that sudden pandemic-accelerated shift to remote interaction.
Yeah.
The COVID-19 pandemic basically forced a global pivot to virtual cooperation, right?
Yeah.
Video meetings, online social events, everything. This fundamentally impacted how society behaves and our comfort levels with digital-first interactions. It made the idea of early metaverse worlds for social stuff, professional engagement, much more acceptable, much faster.
So the pandemic was kind of like a global boot camp for digital comfort.
It certainly sped things up. And finally, the material really emphasizes the major investments being poured into this space. That validates the market, spurs more development. It specifically calls out Facebook Meta's estimated $10 billion investment back in 2021.
$10 billion. Wow.
And significant investments from other tech giants like Microsoft, too. They all see huge opportunities here. This level of financial commitment, it enhances capabilities for developers and stimulates this virtuous cycle of further investment.
Okay, so if we put it all together, the current rise seems to be driven by, the right digital tools finally being ready, a big societal shift towards being comfortable with virtual interaction, the source notes acceptance by younger generations like Gen Z especially, and just massive financial investments making large-scale development actually feasible.
Yeah, that effectively summarizes the driving forces that the source material lays out.
So if you actually want to step into this world, how do you do it? How does the source describe accessing and, navigating the metaverse? It sounds like it requires a bit of a mental shift, not just technology.
It does. The material actually says accessing the metaverse requires changing our understanding of how we perceive and interact with objects. The goal is to make you feel similar sensations, similar connections when you're interacting with virtual objects as you do with real ones. Really blurring that line in your perception.
Blurring the line inside your head, not just on the screen.
Right.
Yeah.
And central to operating within this space is your digital representation, the avatar. These are your digital characters. They represent you as a user, and they allow you to interact within these communities, perform tasks, as if you're, truly part of that virtual reality.
Your avatar is basically your identity and your presence in the metaverse.
Exactly. And the material outlines a kind of general process for accessing these platforms. It starts with the need for defined laws and conditions that govern how avatars move and interact on a specific platform.
Okay.
Then you typically need to register on the digital community platform you want to enter.
Like signing up for any website or service.
Pretty much like that, yeah. You accept the terms and conditions, and then you create your avatar, your virtual character, your digital identity. Once you're inside, you engage in targeted interactions and activities, but always sticking to that platform's specific guidelines and virtual laws.
And what about the physical gear? The source mentions registration tools. What are those?
Yes, it lists the necessary technical devices, things like glasses, gloves, headsets. These work using VR, AR, MR, and XR technologies, often combined with AI, to immerse you in the environment.
And the goal for these tools, is it just for tech enthusiasts?
No, the source states the ultimate aim is for these tools to become easy and intuitive enough for, mainstream adoption. Looking ahead, the vision is to enable persistent digital identities, so you can move seamlessly and be recognized across different virtual worlds and experiences.
So your avatar isn't just stuck in one place.
Ideally, no. Effortless avatar creation and the ability to carry your identity, maybe even your assets, between platforms that's seen as really key for mass adoption.
That makes perfect sense. You wouldn't want a completely new identity every time you visit a different virtual shop or world. The source also gives examples of platforms that exist now, right?
It does. It mentions VR chat, Microsoft Mesh, spatial, crypto voxels, noting that one requires a crypto wallet specifically. Meta Horizon worlds, the classic Second Life, Avakin, Sandbox, and Roblox are also listed. It even briefly mentions a more futuristic platform called Star Atlas, described as imagining travel to the year 2620.
Star Atlas. Sounds ambitious. Okay, so those are some of the places you might actually go and the tools you'd use to get there. Let's dig a little deeper into those tools then. The source material highlights VR, AR, MR, and XR as the primary technologies enabling access. What does it tell us about these different realities?
Yeah, the material breaks them down pretty nicely. First, you've got virtual reality, VR. It's all about creating computer simulations of environments. It's primarily visual, right? Displayed on a screen or as a virtual object. Can include sound, too.
Like wearing a headset.
Exactly. Devices like the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, even Google Cardboard. Those are examples that transport you into a simulated, semi-realistic environment. You experience it virtually. More advanced VR systems can even incorporate sensors for touch, optical input, infrared, sound.
Okay, so VR is about being fully immersed in a digital world that completely replaces your physical surroundings.
Yes, and the material describes accessing VR as generally being without real-time interaction with the models or scenes themselves, meaning you're mostly experiencing a presented simulation rather than directly manipulating elements within it in your real-time physical space, if that makes sense.
Got it. Okay, how about augmented reality, AR? How's that different?
AR is quite different, yeah. Instead of replacing your environment, it projects virtual objects or information into your real environment. Think of it like adding a layer of digital information or seeing 3D guides or models overlaid onto the physical world you see around you. The material says you can interact positively with the scene, enhancing your sensory perception, seeing, hearing, maybe even touching simulated elements right there in your real space.
How does it do that?
It uses smart devices, smartphones, smart glasses, maybe even contact lenses or gloves in the future. And it often relies on spatial tracking like GPS to know where you are in the real world so it can place the virtual objects correctly.
So AR adds digital layers to reality, while VR just replaces reality entirely. Does the source give examples of AR?
Yes, it mentions popular examples like the game Pokemon Go or Snapchat lenses, things many people have already used.
Right, familiar territory. Okay, what about mixed reality, MR?
Mixed reality, MR, as the material explains it, is basically a combination of VR and AR technologies. Its main goal is to achieve a deeper level of interaction between real and digital objects.
Okay, combining them.
Yeah. Microsoft's HoloLens is mentioned as a prominent early example of an MR device. It often uses precise sensors, maybe attached to gloves or limbs, to facilitate this interaction, although the source does note that achieving its full potential sometimes requires a, fully equipped studio environment.
Allowing real and digital things to truly interact. Got it. And finally, extended reality XR. What's that?
Extended reality XR is described as the latest, most comprehensive term. It basically serves as an umbrella term covering VR, AR, and MR.
Ah, okay. All of them together.
Pretty much. It aims to enhance human senses, create detailed simulations, enable complex interaction, and even allow for AI data analysis within these combined physical and virtual spaces. The material notes it integrates physical and virtual elements to create a shared interactive space, and it's already seeing wide use in fields like medicine and education.
Okay, so quick recap. VR is full simulation, AR adds to reality, MR blends them with interaction, and XR is the big umbrella term for the whole spectrum. That breakdown from the source is actually really helpful for understanding the tools. Now, let's follow the money, as they say. The source material says the metaverse is expected to have a pretty significant economic impact. What kind of economy is actually taking shape within this virtual world?
Well, the material notes, it's definitely still in its early stages, but it anticipates significant disruption to traditional business models and the emergence of entirely new economic systems within these virtual spaces.
What are people actually trading or expected to trade? What's being bought and sold?
The source lists several key types of goods and services. First off, virtual real estate commerce.
Virtual?
Exactly. Buying, selling, renting virtual land, properties, spatial areas within metaverse platforms. It's expected to attract considerable attention because of the potential for high value and, financial returns. Users acquire this virtual land for all sorts of purposes, building virtual homes, setting up shops or businesses, even developing entire virtual complexes. Second, virtual currencies. The material points to the global trend of using digital currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum for transactions, and it notes that metaverse communities are adopting similar financial policies. These digital currencies are really the essential basis for exchange for everything bought and sold inside these worlds.
Okay, so virtual land and virtual money. Sounds a bit like the physical world, just digital. What else is part of this economy?
Next up is virtual goods and commodities. This covers countless items users can purchase and trade to personalize their avatars or their virtual environments. Things like clothing, accessories, shoes, maybe weapons and games, cars, personal belongings.
Digital fashion and gear.
Yeah, and the material highlights that these items can have varying levels of rarity or uniqueness, which gives them potentially high value for collectors or hobbyists who want to really enhance their virtual identity.
Right, like collecting rare items in a game, but maybe broader?
Exactly. Then there's the provision of virtual services. Metaverse platforms can facilitate a whole range of services. This could include administrative tasks, technical support, virtual design and development work, planning and managing virtual events like concerts or conferences.
Wait, managing virtual events?
Yeah, mimicking real-life event management, but in a digital space. Handling logistics, execution, and also things like virtual solutions for industries like tourism. The key is users can exchange their skills and services for virtual currencies or assets, which actually creates job opportunities within the metaverse itself.
So you can potentially provide services and essentially work inside this virtual economy. That's interesting.
The material definitely suggests that's a significant emerging area. And finally, there's intellectual property fees. This refers to fees tied to registering and trading virtual goods, products, services, and the creations of innovators and artists, basically virtual IP.
Okay.
The material emphasizes that the metaverse framework sort of confirms the ability to own, sell, or license digital innovations like art, simulations, music, designs, or, importantly, NFTs. Strong IT rights and protection are considered absolutely crucial for establishing trade value in this space.
That point about IP and ownership is key, and it leads perfectly into the engine for a lot of this virtual exchange. Digital currencies. The source says cryptocurrencies are absolutely central here.
Yeah, they're described as key players, really facilitating all the trade and exchange. The material notes a boom in unique digital currencies specifically designed for these virtual economies driven by the rise of VR, AR, and just broader internet tech.
The source material lists several specific cryptocurrencies that are prominent in this space. Can we walk through those?
Sure. The first one mentioned, unsurprisingly, is Bitcoin. While it wasn't created specifically for virtual worlds, it's the leading crypto. It's widely accepted on many online platforms. Its decentralized nature and global recognition just make it useful for cross-border transactions, including within virtual environments.
The OG crypto. How about Ethereum? It always seems to come up with NFTs.
Yeah, Ethereum ETH is highlighted as having great influence, largely because of its robust smart contract capabilities and the powerful blockchain platform it provides. It's widely used for building decentralized applications, or dApps, and it forms the foundation for many digital game projects and virtual communities.
Right, those smart contracts are fundamental for a lot of digital assets. What about currencies designed specifically for the metaverse? Any examples?
The material specifically names the Sandbox Crypto, NAD, as a top currency directly associated with metaverse platforms. It mentions it competes with MAA, which is the currency for another big platform, Decentraland. Sand itself was launched back in 2012, so it's been around a while.
Sand and Menace. Definitely names you hear a lot in this context. What else is the source list?
Engine, ENJ, is mentioned. It's a digital currency built specifically to help create and manage virtual goods within gaming environments. It allows developers to easily integrate NFT instructions into their games.
Okay. And Flow.
Flow, F-L-O-W, is described as a currency focused more on gaming and entertainment, used for building dApps and paying transaction fees. A key feature mentioned is its focus on scalability, trying to provide possibilities for expansion as these worlds grow bigger.
Axie Infinity was huge for a while. It has its own coin, right?
Yes, Axie Infinity, AXS, is the native cryptocurrency for that popular blockchain game where players collect, breed, and trade those digital creatures called Axies.
And there's a relatively large, newer one mentioned, too.
The source lists ApeCoin, APE. It calls it one of the largest, though more recently launched coins used in the virtual metaverse space. It was specifically designed to support the whole ecosystem built around the Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT assets.
Right, the Bored Apes. Okay, that's a really good overview of the key currencies apparently fueling this economy. The source also touches on some practical questions like security and risk. What does it say?
It does. Regarding security, the material explains that these metaverse worlds leverage the characteristics of blockchain technology, which inherently provides pretty high security and transparency for transactions. This helps reduce risks like fraud or hacking within the system itself.
Okay, so the blockchain helps. What about risks specifically with NFTs, though? There's been a lot of talk about that.
The source acknowledges that while the underlying tech is secure, risks like market fluctuations, prices going up and down wildly, and potential fraud, which can sometimes arise from human factors, do exist. However, it notes that conducting transactions on reputable, well-established platforms can significantly mitigate these risks.
And the big question, can you actually exchange these virtual currencies for traditional money, like dollars or euros?
Yes, the material confirms that. Many of these metaverse currencies are listed on various cryptocurrency exchanges, allowing users to convert their virtual assets into traditional fiat currencies if they want to.
So the connection between the metaverse and digital currencies, especially including NFTs, is described as being incredibly close, really complex, forming the absolute core of economic activity within these spaces. That takes us directly to NFTs then. The source material calls non-fungible tokens a, quote, revolutionary concept that's really shaken things up in the digital asset world. What does the source tell us are the key aspects of NFTs? What makes them tick?
Well, the source defined NFTs as tokens built on blockchain technology. The crucial part, it says, is that their code is non-exchangeable, meaning each unit represents a unique asset. Yeah. These assets can be anything from digital art, video clips, music, any other digital content, really. An NFT is presented as basically a verifiable certificate of authenticity and ownership. It's for acquiring and trading virtual property, representing unique digital assets like land, real estate, or specific items in games. And the material notes they're often based on the Ethereum blockchain.
A verifiable certificate for unique digital stuff. What are the core characteristics that make them different from, say, Bitcoin?
Several key things are listed. Firstly, they are unique and not interchangeable. You can't just swap one NFT directly for another and expect them to be equivalent, unlike swapping one Bitcoin for another Bitcoin. They uniquely identify digital assets, each with its own distinct value. Secondly, they provide verifiable proof of ownership. This ownership information is recorded in smart contracts right on the blockchain, which is public and verifiable by anyone.
That public verifiable ownership record on a ledger, that seems like a huge deal for digital assets, doesn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
The material also notes they represent digital ownership of assets, whether it's art, game items, virtual land, and they're linked to the underlying asset via unique encrypted signatures. This is what helps distinguish originals from copies or fakes in the digital realm.
Okay.
And all NFT transactions are recorded publicly on the blockchain, making them traceable. This enhances their authenticity and auditability.
And the Blockchain Foundation provides the security and makes it verifiable.
Yes, the material highlights those aspects, the security and verifiability that come with blockchain for these transactions. It also emphasizes that NFTs, by being unique and trackable, help create digital scarcity, which wasn't really possible for digital items before. It leverages those blockchain advantages. The material even points to their rapid growth, citing transaction volumes jumping from about $250 million in 2020 to $500 million in just the first week of 2021.
Wow, $500 million in a week back then. That growth rate is stunning. What kind of things can actually be turned into NFTs according to the source? Is it just art?
No, the source lists a pretty broad range. It includes innovative intellectual works like blog posts or even tweets, but also things like legal rights, such as virtual land ownership deeds. NFTs essentially function as a kind of virtual entity or token used for formally registering and managing assets within these emerging virtual IP systems.
The material also notes this whole area is still evolving pretty fast, and there's a lot of ongoing discussion, right?
Absolutely. Discussions are definitely ongoing around things like sustainability concerns, the energy use of some blockchains, copyright issues, what their true contribution to the global economy actually is, and market stability, given the price swings we've seen.
So just to be crystal clear, how does an NFT fundamentally differ from something like regular cryptocurrency or traditional money?
The material makes this distinction pretty clear. Unlike fungible assets like Bitcoin, which is divisible and interchangeable, right? One Bitcoin is the same as any other Bitcoin NFTs are non-fungible.
Non-fungible, okay.
Meaning they're unique, they're generally indivisible, and they're non-replaceable with an identical item, because no identical item exists. Transferring ownership involves a transaction, usually requiring a digital currency like Ethereum, but the NFT itself moves as a singular, unique item.
So you're buying the specific unique thing represented by the NFT, not just an equivalent amount of something.
Exactly. That's the core idea. The material also briefly covers the components of NFT systems. They're managed via blockchain, Ethereum being a common example, and they use smart contracts to record that transaction history on the transparent public ledger.
And how does the actual managing of buying and selling work? Where does this happen?
NFTs are traded on specialized online markets or marketplaces. The systems behind these markets manage the trading operations. They calculate fees, handle licensing payments, determine percentages for creators if that's built in, and automatically verify the asset's features and ownership history using those smart contracts. And the process of creating an NFT, sometimes called minting, involves steps like attaching the digital asset to a smart contract, designing the unique token, actually creating it, determining its initial virtual value, and publishing the associated metadata so people know what it represents.
That gives a really detailed picture of how NFTs fit into this whole digital economy, from actually making them to trading them. Now, all this virtual world building and economy managing, it sounds like it's going to require a whole new workforce, doesn't it? What does the source material say about future jobs and the skills needed in the metaverse?
Yeah, the source introduces this concept called future foresight, which basically anticipates that while some existing jobs might disappear, a lot of new ones will emerge, heavily reliant on modern technologies, very much including the metaverse.
Okay.
These future jobs, it says, will demand innovative thinking, creative implementation, requiring a real blend of technical skills, creative and design skills, other important abilities, and business acumen, too.
It lists several specific roles it sees being in demand, right? What are some of these potential future metaverse jobs?
Yeah, let's go through the list provided in the source. First, the metaverse engineer. This is the person who actually designs and creates the virtual environments themselves.
The world builder.
Exactly. This role requires skills in 3D modeling, virtual architecture, user experience, UX design, platform management, spatial planning. UI UX design and content creation are highlighted as particularly crucial skills for this engineer. Second, the virtual economic practices designer. This sounds like a mouthful, but it's the professional who designs the smart economic systems within the virtual world, manages digital currencies, handles economic modeling, focuses on investment returns. It requires blending economic principles with modern design thinking.
So basically virtual economists and system designers. Interesting.
All right. Third, the virtual fashion designer. This is a field the source calls booming. These designers create virtual clothes, accessories, other wearables for avatars, tailoring them to people's digital identities or the characteristics of specific virtual communities. Fourth, the virtual event planner. This person is responsible for planning and organizing virtual events, conferences, social gatherings, concerts, all within the metaverse. Essentially mimicking real-life event management but doing it in a digital space, handling all the logistics and execution there. Fifth, the virtual marketer. This role involves digital promotion and marketing, but specifically for virtual products and services within the metaverse, designing strategies, identifying opportunities, reaching audiences inside these virtual worlds.
Digital marketing, but adapted specifically for the digital world itself, makes perfect sense.
Indeed. Sixth, the virtual reality developer. These are the technical builders, right? Creating and maintaining the underlying technological systems. This needs strong programming, game development skills, focusing on ensuring seamless interaction between the metaverse platforms, the software, and all those different access devices. The VR glasses, the sensors. Skills in VR development and programming languages like C#, C++, JavaScript, Python are seen as key here. Seventh, the AI trainer. This role involves developing and training the AI systems to enable realistic and dynamic interactions within the virtual environment. The material mentions this needs expertise in AI, with a focus on enabling nuanced concepts, maybe even relating to quality of life within the virtual world. Eighth, the virtual law enforcement officer. This is an intriguing one. This role involves enforcing virtual laws, ensuring safety, regulating activities, and addressing virtual crimes that might happen within the metaverse. Cybersecurity skills are highlighted as essential for this.
Wow, virtual police patrolling the digital streets. That's something. Exactly. Ninth, the psychologist virtual therapist. The source recognizes that as people potentially spend significant time in virtual worlds, mental health support will likely be necessary. So these professionals would provide counseling and therapeutic support specifically designed for the unique context of virtual environments. And 10th on the list is the virtual reality fitness trainer. This role guides virtual characters' avatars through exercises, potentially influenced by the user's own movements, using specialized VR fitness applications.
So you could potentially have a virtual personal trainer putting your avatar through a workout. That is a fascinatingly broad range of potential careers, really diverse.
And the material concludes this section by noting, this list probably isn't exhaustive. Additional roles and necessary skills are almost certainly going to emerge as metaverse technologies mature and user demands evolve over time.
The source material also includes a specific real-world example, doesn't it? A strategy focused on embracing the metaverse. It does, yeah. It briefly touches on Dubai's metaverse strategy. And the aims outlined are quite ambitious. They want to establish Dubai as a top 10 leading global economy and position it as a major hub for the global metaverse community.
That's a big goal. What are some of the concrete goals and actions mentioned in their strategy? How are they planning to do that?
Well, key strategic goals include building a robust metaverse ecosystem, establishing accelerators and incubators to support new ventures in the space, strengthening their global innovation and competitiveness in this area, and aiming to significantly increase the number of blockchain and metaverse-related companies operating there, targeting a 5-fold increase, hoping to bring in 1,000 companies.
1,000 companies. Wow.
Yeah, and they also prioritize talent and training, aiming to provide 40,000 virtual jobs eventually. And they project a significant contribution to their economic prosperity by 2030 through R&D and adoption in this area. The strategy also mentions using tools like simulation, machine learning, and reasoning for their own decision-making processes related to this.
40,000 virtual jobs. That's a very substantial target. What about the legal and regulatory side? Are they addressing that?
The material highlights legislative efforts as well. The formation of their Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, or VARA, is noted as Dubai being an early mover in creating a dedicated regulatory body just for virtual assets. They also passed a specific law, Law No. 4 of 2022, regulating virtual assets. This provides a legal framework for companies operating in metaverse services, addressing data protection, cybersecurity is part of this too, and they've apparently issued guidelines for NFT trading, including for virtual real estate and intellectual property.
It sounds like they're actively trying to build the legal infrastructure needed to support this whole ecosystem.
They seem to be, yes. And the material points out that Dubai is embracing future technologies through other initiatives like its blockchain strategy and actively positioning itself at the forefront of adopting Web3 technologies more broadly.
So the takeaway seems to be that Dubai isn't just waiting around, they're actively aiming to lead in establishing themselves in this emerging space.
That's exactly the conclusion drawn in the source, that Dubai is aiming to take the initiative and lead, which aligns with its broader globalization aspirations.
Wow, okay. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive, all based directly on the source material you provided us. We've unpacked the fundamental concept of the metaverse, traced its surprisingly long history back through science fiction, explored the convergence of technology and events driving its current rise, looked at how you might actually access and navigate it through avatars and specialized tools like VR and AR.
And broken down those underlying technologies. VR, AR, MR, and that umbrella term XR.
Right. And then we dove into the emerging economy within the metaverse, discussing virtual real estate, goods, services, the absolutely crucial role of digital currencies, and that revolutionary concept of NFTs as digital ownership tokens.
We also examined the potential future job market, the skills that might be needed, and even saw that real-world example of a comprehensive strategy being implemented right now in Dubai.
It's undeniably clear from the source material that the metaverse is presented, well, not as a simple game, is it? But as a complex, evolving digital platform with the potential to be truly transformative. And it's underpinned by a very, very close relationship with digital currencies and NFTs.
Absolutely. The material really emphasizes the potential for this parallel virtual world to impact multiple facets of our lives, our economies, our societies, our jobs, maybe even our sense of identity, as we navigate these increasingly blurred lines between the physical and digital realms.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought drawn from the source material for you, the listener, to consider after this deep dive. If the goal really is to make interacting with virtual objects feel as real as interacting with physical ones, and if our digital identities become increasingly persistent and transportable across these virtual worlds, how will this fundamental blurring of physical and digital reality ultimately reshape our understanding of work, of community, and perhaps even existence itself?